All right, in this video we will be drawing an emoji using the basic drawing tools in Adobe Illustrator as we did together in class. This video is designed to be a review of what we did and to help you walk through all the steps again. So I have a new file open on my computer. This is just 8.5 by 11, although if I was drawing a specific size, I would actually create a new file with a very specific size. What we'll be drawing together is an emoji, similar to the one that you can see here, using the various tools in Illustrator. I have my file open. I'm going to actually go ahead and save it before I start, and now and then that'll ensure that as I'm working, if anything happens, I can easily retrieve it later on. I'm saving it as an Adobe Illustrator format, or keyboard, or the extension is .ai. And I will always encourage us to work in the native format of the software. So drawing emoji, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the ellipse tool. And we're going to draw a circle on the artboard. Now, I can click and drag to draw a circle. If I hold down Shift, it will force the circle proportions to constrain, meaning it'll be a perfect circle. Or if I know a specific size that I want, with the circle tool selected, all I have to do is just click on the artboard and I can enter in the exact dimensions of the circle. Right now you'll notice my circle is not in the center of the artboard. I want to move it. And in order to move the circle, I'm going to use the selection tool. I'm going to use the black selection tool, the black arrow. The black arrow allows you to select an entire object in Illustrator. Everything in Illustrator is created using vector objects. A vector object is a shape made out of 4 or 5 or 6 or however many anchor points. And the shape is controlled by the relationship between the anchor points. In this case here you can see the top anchor point and the bottom anchor point. Vector shapes are not based on pixels. They're based on that mathematical formula that basically says the distance between this point and this point is whatever the formula is. And so because of that, it allows us to scale objects to any size that we want without losing resolution. This is the benefit of working with a vector-based program. Whereas Photoshop is pixel-based, similar technology to taking photos and taking film, vector-based programs are made out of shapes that are based on that mathematical formula in terms of the distance from this anchor to this anchor to this anchor to this anchor. You'll notice when I'm selecting on the anchors, I can actually see what's known as the Bezier handles. Bezier handles allow us to control the curve between two anchor points and control the nature of the curve. All we have to do is click on them and drag them to work with the curve. All objects on the artboard can have both a fill and a stroke. Currently, right now, what you're seeing is the circle that I created with just a fill applied. I'm going to open up the Properties panel. So I'm going to go Window, Properties, and it's already up open here on the left. And you can see right now I have a black fill and nothing applied for the stroke. I'm going to double click where it says Fill to open up my swatch panel. In this case, I'm going to choose a yellow color for the fill. I also want to have a black stroke around the edge to give it that comical appearance. So I'm going to click on where it has stroke. I'm going to select the black color. And then I can actually control how large of a stroke it's going to be. In this case, I'm going to make it a couple pixels big, or a couple points big, sorry, not pixels. So we have a decent sized stroke. As I'm drawing, I want to keep control and organization of my different objects, and I'm going to do so with the Layers panel. And I can get it by going Window, Layers. And here I can see on the Layers panel, I've drawn my circle. There's a drop down. That'll allow me to expand the layer that I'm working on as I go and see all the different elements. All right, I've got the background of my emoji drawn. The next step is I'm going to create the mouth. I'm going to start by creating another circle over top of my initial circle. Now, as you draw a circle, another trick you can also do is if you hold down Shift, it'll constrain the proportions. If you hold down Option and Shift as you draw your circle, it'll draw from the center outwards. I'm going to position the mouth just around the lower middle half. If I don't like the size of the shape, you'll notice that when I have the shape selected, you can see these transformation nodes in the corner. I can click on any of those with my black arrow selected, and I can change the size and the shape of the circle that I've drawn. If I hold down Shift, it'll constrain the proportions once again as I'm changing the size. If I want to select an individual anchor point, which we'll do later on, then I would use the white direct selection tool. I need my mouth here to be black color. So in my properties panel, I'm going to change the fill to black. And I'm going to remove the stroke. I can do so by clicking on the none. There we are. I want to draw a tongue to sit in the bottom of the emoji's mouth, and I'm going to do so again with another ellipse. So I'm going to grab my ellipse tool again. Keyboard shortcut is L. I'm going to create kind of almost egg-shaped ellipse. I'm going to change the color to red. This is going to be my tongue. Now, what I'm drawing is actually I want to have that bumps of a tongue, like you see here. And to do so, I need to duplicate this shape that I've drawn. I can do so in many ways. In my layers panel, and you can see the shapes I've drawn in my layers panel, I could drag the shape down to the new layer icon to duplicate it. I could copy it, Command C or Control C on a PC, and then paste it, Command V, to duplicate it. Or my personal favorite, with the black arrow selected, I can hold down Option and drag my shape to the left, or to the right, sorry, and that'll duplicate it. Any object in Illustrator, if you Option drag it, it will duplicate the shape. There's many ways to do it. There's no wrong way. All the ways work the same. They're duplicating the shape. It all depends on what your preference is. Now that I have my tongue shape created, I need to create some teeth. And I'm going to do so with my rounded rectangle tool. It's in the same spot as the ellipse tool. If I hold down the button for the flyout menu, I can see the rounded rectangle there. I'm going to select it. I'm going to change my color. I can change my color over here as well to white. I'm going to draw a rounded rectangle to make my teeth. As you're drawing the rounded rectangle, if you use the up and down arrows on your keyboard, you can actually change how much of a curve the corners have. A tooth. I want to duplicate my tooth so I can make a full mouth of teeth. I'm going to once again do it this time. You can either use the copy paste. I'm going to use the Option drag to duplicate it. As I'm dragging and holding down the Shift button, and that keeps them all in a nice straight line. There we go. I've got 6 teeth. Now you'll notice that my 6 teeth are not evenly spaced out. I'd like them to be spaced out a little bit nicer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the alignment panel to space them out better. Now, the alignment tools can be found up in the top control bar. There is an actual alignment panel, Window, Align. Or you'll notice over here in the property panel, there's also alignment tools as well. I'm going to select all those teeth, and I can do so by holding down Shift as I select them all with my black direct selection, my black selection tool. And now from that alignment panel, I'm going to select the distribute horizontal centers, and that'll distribute my teeth evenly. Now my teeth are still wider than the mouth. I can fix that as well. With them all still selected, I can use, once again, my selection tool. I'm going to click in the corner, hold down Shift, and I can resize them so they're about the right width of the mouth. They are quite spaced out, but this is supposed to be kind of a silly looking face, so that's fine. If you wanted them closer together, you could select them and nudge them over using your left and right arrows on your keyboard. And then once again, to evenly space them, select them all, distribute horizontal centers. There we go. Let's move those nicer in place. All right, I've got some teeth, I've got a tongue, I've got a mouth. I want to actually now change the shape of the mouth. And I'm going to do that using one of the Pathfinder tools. To start, in my Layers panel, I'm going to duplicate my black background shape. I'm going to basically be creating that black background shape as a duplicate and then using it to mask part of the mouth so you only see inside around the tongue and the teeth. So I can select on that in my Layers panel by clicking on the little icon on the right or by selecting on it on the artboard. I want to duplicate it in place, so I could either copy it, keyboard shortcut is Command C, or Edit, Copy. And then I want to paste it back in place, Edit, Paste in Place, which is also Shift Command V. Or in my keyboard, I can actually select on it and drag it down to the new layer icon, the little plus. That'll duplicate it, and then I just have to move it to the top of the stacking order in the keyboard. For the purposes of working with this object, I'm just going to change its color so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing while I'm working on it. So I've duplicated that object, and I'm going to manipulate it now to make the shape of my mouth. In order to do so, I'm going to use, this time, my white selection, or the direct selection tool, the white arrow. The white arrow allows me to select on individual anchor points, whereas the black selection tool, the black arrow, selects the entire shape. The white arrow, or the direct selection tool, allows me to select individual anchor points. And in this case, I'm going to select the top anchor point. I'm going to drag it down so it's just above where the teeth are ending. I'm going to be using this shape now to create a mask to hide the rest of the mouth. The steps involved include selecting all the objects that make up the mouth, grouping them all, and then using a Pathfinder tool to crop them. To start, actually, I'm going to lock my background ellipse layer. You can see in the Layers panel next to the visibility eyeball that turns on and off the visibility, there's an empty space that allows us to lock any element in the layout. I'm locking that background layer so I don't accidentally select it. Now I'm going to select all the other elements, the background black shape, the two red ovals that make up the tongue, the teeth, and that path at the front. You can see in my Layers panel I've got them all selected. You can also select them on the artboard by holding down Shift, or you can even actually with the selection arrow drag over top them to select them all. I can do that last one because I've got that background ellipse locked. With them all selected, I'm going to group them together. So I'm going to go Object Group. Keyboard shortcut is Command G. In order to apply the effect we're going to use, the objects all have to be grouped together. And I'm going to use a Pathfinder tool. The Pathfinder tools are kind of almost like cookie cutter tools in the way that they interact shapes with each other, allowing you to cut one shape out of another. In this case, we're going to use that top shape that blue bean looking shape to create a mask, meaning that only where the blue shape is appearing, the background shapes will be visible. So with them all selected and grouped, I'm going to go Effect, Pathfinder, and I'm going to use the crop. I'm cropping everything to the top shape. And so as you can see there, all those shapes are still there, but they're visible only where the top shape in that or the group was. I'll hit Command Z to undo to show you again. In my layer here, you can see how I've got that group curated with all the objects underneath the blue shape at the top. It's the top shape that's going to dictate what's visible. Only where the blue shape is where everything underneath is going to be visible. So I'm going to go Effect, Pathfinder, Crop, and that'll allow me to crop that shape. And now I've got an open looking mouth in the shape of that top shape that we built. Now that we have a mouth drawn, we're going to continue drawing some eyeballs. Excuse me. Before I go on, I'll just point out to you that there are other Pathfinder tools that we're going to take a look at and use, including intersect, exclude, subtract, minus back, divide, trim, and so on. We'll continue looking at those later on as we explore more options in Illustrator. I'm going to make an eyeball over on this side, and I'm going to do so in a similar way to how I made the mouth. I'm going to start with my ellipse tool. I'm going to draw an eyeball. I'm going to change the color of the fill to white. I can use my selection tool to move it around. I'm going to create a smaller eyeball, a smaller ball, a smaller circle over top, and give it a blue fill. I guess it doesn't have to be blue, it could be any color you wish. I just chose blue because my eyes are that color. There we are. I'm going to create another shape there. With that blue circle selected, I'm going to add a gradient to it. A gradient is going to allow me to have a nice color transition that's going to go from a dark blue into a light blue in the center, similar to how eyeballs do in real life. To do so, I'm going to open my gradient panel. So I'm going to go Window, Gradient. Here's my gradient panel. And I'm also going to open my swatch panel. Window, Swatches. These are preset colors that make working with the gradient a lot easier. With my eyeball still selected, I guess the pupil still selected. Probably not actually pupil, yeah, pupil selected. With the blue part of the eyeball selected, I'm going to turn it into a gradient, and I can do so by selecting in the gradient tool. In this case, I have a choice of 3 different gradients, a linear, a radial, and a freeform. I'm going to use the radial gradient, and that is going to apply a gradient that is going to travel from the outside to the center, from the dark color to the light color. I'm going to change the colors in the gradient by dragging colors from my swatch panel into that gradient slider. In this case, I want to go from a dark blue. You can see this about to add it because I've got a little green plus. Maybe transition to a medium blue. And then I'm going to leave the white in the center, but I'm going to adjust its position by moving the slider over. This will allow me to have a little bit more control over my gradient. I can also control, you'll notice at the top of the slider, what the transition from the colors appears like on the screen. So I can either have it so that it transitions from white to blue very quickly, gradually, or the opposite. Maybe I'll pull this back a little. It's a little too much there. All right. If you have a color in your gradient slider that you don't like, all you have to do is select on it and pull down, and it removes the color from the slider. All right, I've got an eyeball that's starting to look a little better. Now I need to add the black center to the eyeball. I'll do so by drawing another ellipse over top of the blue one. You'll notice that it comes in by default the last color that I used. In this case, the last color that I used was the gradient. So I'm going to switch it back to black. There we go. A little bit more like an eyeball. And if I really want to give it a little shine, I can literally do that by drawing one last little ellipse on it. Changing that color to white. That gives me a little bit of shine. I'm going to zoom in for a second so I can just fine tune that. I'm zooming in with the zoom tool. There we go. To move, like I just did, you can move around with the hand tool. Keyboard shortcut is H, or the space bar allows you to move around with the hand tool. All right, my eyeball is looking good, but I want to make it look a little bit less wide-eyed. So I'm going to use another crop like I did with the mouth on my eyeball here. I'm going to start by duplicating the back shape, that ellipse. I can either change it in the layers panel or select it, edit, copy, edit, paste in place. I'm going to change the color so you can see it while I'm editing it. This time I'm going to adjust that bottom anchor point, but before I do, I'm going to rotate my shape a little. And you'll notice that when I move my cursor to the corner just outside of those transformation nodes, my cursor changes to a little bit of a curved arrow. I'm going to rotate my shape just a little. And now I can access that anchor point just off to the side. And this way, with my white selection arrow, direct selection arrow, I can adjust it a little bit this way rather than having it being right in the middle. I'm going to crop these again using the Pathfinder tool. So I select everything including the white background. Group them together. Object, group. Keyboard shortcut is Command G. Use the Pathfinder effect. Pathfinder crop. And now I've got an extremely wide-eyed looking emoji. Rather than spending a lot of time redrawing that eye, I can duplicate that eye and flip it. So I'll select the eye, edit, copy, edit, paste, move it to a position. There we are. And if I want to transform it so it flips the other way, I can go Object, Transform, Reflect. And there I have a very basic emoji shape as we've drawn together. As you can see, objects drawn in Illustrator are just a series of shapes placed on top of each other, arranged in such a way that they end up looking like the thing they're supposed to look like. It's completely editable. I can select any object in here and adjust and change it. For example, I can select that shine in the eyeball and slide it over so the two eyes, the shines kind of match. In the example I prepared earlier, I made the shape of the bottom of the eye a little bit more sharp. I added a slight gradient to the background of lips. You can see there if I select it, there's a slight gradient to it. And I even added a slight gradient to the two parts that make up the tongue. In this example, I went a little further. I made one eyeball and changed the color to green, and I added a couple other elements to it to give it a bit of an appearance like Mike Wazowski from Monsters, Inc. And to be true to Monsters, Inc., as I close the video, I'll cover Mike up. Look, I'm famous. That is the basics of drawing with Illustrator using shapes. All objects drawn in the Illustrator primarily use a series of shapes stacked on top of each other with various colors and gradients and blends applied to them. We use the Pathfinder tools to break apart shapes, which I will demonstrate as well. And then the next video, I'll demonstrate how we can use the pen tool to draw more complex shapes rather than circles, squares, and rectangles. So hopefully this was fun. Hopefully it was a good introduction to drawing some basics with Illustrator.